Okay, hello everyone. We are going to continue about Hitler. So in part one, we learned about how Hitler rose to power. And in this particular video, we are looking at specifically his impact, as well as how he consolidated power. So if you had remember the Munich beer putsch, which was a riot, it was a failure, right? And Hitler was actually put in prison. Okay, and he wrote his very famous book, Mein Kampf. Okay, and in that he became specifically very popular. So now the general Germans were aware of his existence. And because he was well known and his point of view somewhat resonate with some of them. However, do remember that in this period of time, Germany was recovering and they were recovering quite well. So there isn't a bit, there isn't this sense of wanting to go against the coalition government. Now, this is also the point where he came to a realization that, he didn't want to take control of Germany through force. Okay, he didn't want to come and grab power. Instead, he wanted to use what we call constitutional means. That means people will vote for him. People will choose the Nazi party over whatever parties that was the flavor of the month. All right, and specifically, we will look at his rule. All right, did it benefit the people in Germany? What were his political impact, his economic impact, and his social impact? All right, now specifically under the political impact or consolidation of power, these are very important timing. The notes later on when I'll share with you, I have already sort of summarized all this. So this particular video is just like a sort of a big overview for Germany. All right, and we'll go through one by one. Now, how did he consolidate power specifically? All right, now it started with this. Now, what is the Reichstag? It is actually a parliament building, and specifically it was burned. So now remember, he is now out of prison. He wants to get more influence, and one of the ways, or one of the trigger, or one of the event was this particular fire, which is a tip-off or a crucial event. So this is currently the Reichstag today, all right, in Germany. And it is almost like a parliament house, like what we have in Singapore. All right, so it got burned, and what had happened? Okay, so backtrack on January 1933, the president, von Hindenburg, okay, which was part of the Weimar Republic, had appointed Hitler as a chancellor. So chancellor is like, if let's say there's a president, your chancellor is like your second in command. It's almost like your prime minister. All right. So this is him. Okay. Now, according to the Weimar Constitution, the chancellor was appointed by the president and was responsible to parliament, okay, and to the president. So you can see people elect the parliament, from the parliament, because he won, he got the majority, and Hindenburg needed that support, all right, and Hitler and Nazi Party was the one. All right, so he was the one that was appointed as chancellor. But of course, the chancellor is still needed to consult the president. Okay, he wanted to have some sort of new elections. He wanted to have new affirmation of his power. Okay, and one of it is in early February 1933, he called for an election. He proposed an election in March 1933. Right, but remember this? The February 1933, then suddenly the Reichstag building was burned. Okay, and the Nazi Party blamed the communists for the fire. Right, he even convinced the president to invoke Article 48. We talked about Article 48 in the previous video. Watch that again. Right, to establish emergency powers to deal with the communists. Very, very important. He used this opportunity. Now, because it was considered, someone burned the parliament, a lot of civil liberties were suspended. So civil liberties is your rights, a lot of political parties were actually banned because it was a period of instability and chaos. All right, they are actually guarantees freedoms that the government cannot take. But because it is a period of emergency, all these privileges were suspended. So there were all these things like the press, privacy, the right for a fair trial, all disappeared. Okay, and everything was in the name of national security. Was it okay? Was it not okay? It depends. I mean, if it was a real emergency and the government has to do something, then it was necessary, right? But we all know back then Hitler had reasons for doing it, and he wanted the Nazi party to be the sole party in Germany. Okay, so because he was able to do this, he was able to deal with the communists. Now, do recap, in the previous video, we said that the communist was a natural enemy for Hitler's Nazi party, which was what we call the extreme right. And they were also getting a lot of support from the German people. So Hitler needed to do something. The Nazi party needed to do something. And you can see he did not just get rid of the communists like that, but he used political means. Okay, and what was interesting, the burning of the Reichstag was 6 days before the election. All right, and as a result of this, there was this Reichstag fire decree. A decree is like a law which suspended all these civil liberties. Okay, so this is the one. It's a decree. It's a common name. Is supposedly to protect the people and state. But he used this to raid the Communist Party and arrest communists. So he effectively eliminated them. Remember, it's 6 days to election, right? And a lot of the SS officers, okay, the army, arrested many communists before elections. And in months before the 1933 elections, there was already a lot of these brown shirts and SS that displayed terror, repression, and propaganda across the land. All right, who are the SAs? The brown shirts. Okay, you see them in some of the movies, in fact. All right, they are to protect the Nazi party candidates who were campaigning. Their role, literally, they used a lot of violence against political opponents. Now, the SS were Hitler's personal bodyguard, and this is how their uniform looks like. All right, and the SS owns direct contact to Hitler, or they sort of pledged loyalty to Hitler rather than the Nazi party. Right, and they provided protection for the Nazi rallies and assemblies. They disrupt meetings, fighting against the paramilitary units of the opposing parties, especially the German Communist Party. And this guy here, right here, is actually Ernst Röhm, which is Hitler's, I would say, good friend. All right. And of course, you have the SS, Hitler's personal bodyguard. All right. And it's, of course, Himmler. Right, Heinrich Himmler. Now, in March 1933 election, what's interesting, you can see the SA sorts of try to navigate the people and try to sort of convince the people who to vote. Okay, now because of that, in the 1933 elections, the Nazi Party secured a majority, and then Hitler quickly passed the Enabling Act. Now, what is this Enabling Act? Basically, it enabled Hitler to pass laws without president's approval. Okay, the Communist Party was then banned from any future election. So he took the step to remove any political opposition. All right, so it was a very smart move on Hitler's side. And after that, all right, from February to March and in July, Nazi Party became the only legal party. Okay, and it became a one-party rule. Now, trade unions were also dissolved. And what are trade unions? So in Singapore, we have trade unions. We have, like, for example, the Singapore Teachers Union or NTUC, not the supermarket, but the trade unions. So the trade unions look after the welfare specifically of workers. All right. Now, the Nazi Party wanted to take the role of looking after the working class because it will be a substantial number of them. Okay. And the either the Nazi Party controls them, or either the Nazi Party converts them to a group of people who's going to be loyal. All right. So this is the importance of the political impact. All right. So now that he has consolidated his power, then you'll be realizing, is there any other things, any threat from the inside? Who else should he remove? Remember, he's someone who wants to make sure that he has complete control. Now, just now remember, we talked about the SA, and the SAs was under the control of Ernst Röhm, who is a loyal follower of Hitler since the very early days of the Nazi Party. Okay, but he has made plans. I mean, not really plans, but because he is powerful, he's in charge of a group of, I would say, paramilitary soldiers, in fact, okay, simplified soldiers, right? But they felt that he was too controlling, too much power. And because of that, Hitler felt that it was a threat. So in June 1934, a year after he has consolidated power in this particular event called Night of the Long Knives, Hitler did what we call an internal shuffle of arresting and killing a chunk of his supporters, which was Röhm and SA leaders, the army, who actually pledged loyalty to the country, to the Nazi party, okay, because he felt that he was threatened. And the impact was, right, after he eliminated all of the SA leaders, the German army swore their allegiance to Hitler. No choice, right? There are many cartoons on it that shows that actually both the armies like sort of hands up, and they chose to be on the side of Hitler. This one, remember this one? Now they salute with both hands, and it's almost like a surrender as well. All right. Now, in the following year, unfortunately, then Hindenburg, the president, died. And now, who shall be the next president of Germany? Okay. Now, within days, Hitler took the opportunity to merge everything, to merge president, chancellor, even economic leader, military leader, and proclaim himself the Führer. So sometimes you hear him being called the Führer. And the Führer means that he encompasses everything. And now Hitler is the sole source of power in Germany. All right, so you can see this goes here from 1933, Night of Long Knives, and then the creation of the Führer. All right, so now he is all controlling, all powerful. What is his next step? Okay, remember, he promised a lot of things. He promised to tear the Treaty of Versailles. He promised to create jobs. He promised German glory. He promised to rebuild the military machine. And he has to fulfill his promise. So now he is going to come up with solutions, strategies, actions to save the economy, as well as to ensure that society is stable. Okay, so one of the things that he promised was employment, because things were not looking good, right? Remember that? Okay, remember the effects of Great Depression, the Treaty of Versailles, right? What happened in America, and how, because of what happened in America, Great Depression, Germany slipped into a Greater Depression. Okay, so he did engaged a lot of people who could help him. All right, so one of it is the Minister of Economies, and who actually have to reorganize German finances. All right, now he also, if you look very carefully at this particular symbol, is a spade, right, with the swastika symbol there. And all the soldiers are carrying sort of spades there. Okay, he built this particular service, which is called the Reichsleben Service, and it was very good because they were working on public works, government buildings, motorways, autobahns, railways, all these kind of things. And they needed people. So when you have big government projects, you hire people. So employment was sort of soft. And in a lot of sometimes the source-based question, you say that, wow, it's amazing, the very fact that Hitler was able to do all this. All right. Of course, it gained him more popularity. He was there right at the thick of things, trying to show to the people that he was going to fulfill what he promised. All right, provided infrastructures, all these kind of things. So these are roads or expressway or what we call autobahns. Okay, but it was the expense of other things. Now, women were made to stop working. The jobs previously held by women were given to unemployed men. All right, the Jews were, for example, removed. And the work that the Jews were doing were given to the Germans. So yes, there were positive impact. There was also negative impact, and especially it created this image of a woman where um, a woman's world should be revolved around her husband and family. All right. Next, of course, Hitler promised the rise of big industries. It benefited from the Nazi economy because definitely Hitler wanted to aim for Germany to be self-sufficient. So all these industries were important. They were given very good subsidies. So big businesses really benefited. And in turn, the big businesses supported the Nazi party. You know, all those propaganda machines all had the backing of big businesses. All right. So companies who were involved in the production of oil, coal, steel increased. There was this 4-year plan to introduce or prep Germany to prepare for war. Because remember, one of the things that he wanted was also to remove and secure Germany. All right, and Germany rearmament provided to be very big businesses. So that means he needed to restart the military again so that they will have weapons. And when you have weapons, you well, obviously you need people to hire people to make the weapon. So it's like a 2-in-1 kind of thing. All right. Now, in return, like what I said, financially supported the Nazi party through donations. Now, it was at the expense of other things. So some of these things is you cannot have your workers to demand for better pay, better conditions, better standard of living. You can't, all right? You can promise them employment, everybody gets employed, but the state of living there is terrible. But because he has banned all trade unions, there was no disruption. There was no negotiation for higher pay. So it was a good thing for the Nazi party and the big businesses, but the standard of living of the people was bad. And they can't actually voice that because there is this constant fear. All right. Now, one of the biggest companies that benefited was actually IBM. And this was some of the things that they created previously. It was a punch card that IBM created. We're talking about the control of trade union. Remember, trade union here means to support workers, okay, by giving workers some sort of rights as well as freedom. All right, we talked about this already. And because he set up his own trade unions, which everybody had to join, it eliminated any sorts of opposition. And yes, it's good. Germany started to recover. People had more jobs. But again, it was at the expense of others. Why you cannot be sacked, but workers are literally controlled very strictly, right? And workers need government permission to quit their jobs. So they can't even quit their jobs anytime. All right. You have to have very good reasons, and it's very very toxic, unsafe environment, even though maybe things are better, but still, right? Safety. There was also an age freeze that call on workers' wages were kept low, waged, not age, wage freezed, all right? They had to work for longer hours. Germany was focused on war in 1936, and look at 1939, near a war, workers worked up 72 hours a week and wages were restricted. Now, having controlled the workers, you've also got a group of workers that they want to sort of, give them some sort of benefits or incentives. And Hitler and the Nazi Party came up with this term, which is called strength through joy. So these are examples of what he did. Okay, to ensure the support of workers because they do realize that workers are important. So he used a lot of propaganda, right, to praise workers, to recognize workers. And in many sense, incentives such as holidays, incentives such as if you save up, you can get your own Volkswagen, which was a German car. And it's called strength through joy. I cannot pronounce this German word, but you can go and find it yourself. And it provided a lot of this cinematic gigs, theaters, sports, cultural events. They supposedly improved certain facilities. So there were positive impact. Okay, and you can see this is one of the most important positive impact, the unemployment reduced. But of course, you must always remember at the back of your mind, it was at the expense of other groups of people. Okay, now at the same time, while you have all these good programs, it also meant that people's leisure time was tightly controlled, and they sort of actually you had to pay for them indirectly. I like this quote really, really a lot. Okay, make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it, and eventually people will believe it. It may not be a quote from Hitler, but I thought this was what um, captures the essence of his rule. Okay, of course, Hitler's idea would always be about remilitarization. It was another way to reduce unemployment. And of course, you can see that he already introduced national service. Conscription is national service, right? And by 1939, 1.4 million men came into the army, or they are in the military. Now, you can just imagine by right, um, League of Nations should have stopped. But of course, we also know the problems of League of Nations. Okay, and you can see he's already starting to build up a modern air force, militarization, all these things. It is good for employment, definitely, and hiring people. And he increased employment by going against. And technically, what he was doing was illegal. So, next bit is what was life under Hitler, all right? Did people love him? Okay, it feels that way, right? Everywhere he goes, people were mesmerized by him. And of course, he used a lot of propaganda. All right, on the left is propaganda on him, on the right is propaganda with regards to the Jews. Okay, now, this guy here, Joseph Goebbels, was the one who sort of organized this under the Ministry of Public Enlightenment, or the Ministry of Propaganda, in fact. And the responsibility was for spiritually influence the nation. And they were very successful in that. It was used to ensure loyalty. It was used to ensure nationalism. It was used to stir up a lot of hatred for the Jews and communism in Germany specifically, and it made everyone very, very together. Right, it did bring the whole Germans together. And you'll be wondering why do Germans agree on such an action? All right, why do Germans agree on annihilation of a race? It was a lot of this, right? Okay, I like again this quote. Okay, you can read this quote. Okay, now posters, portraits, songs, symbols, uniform, everything to just stir up this nationalist sentiments. Okay, films were created. I think this was very, very important. It also ties into, when people were given tickets, they were given to certain specific shows, so it's a lot of brainwashing involved. Okay, so censorship is another one. There were a lot of things that was censored, whether it was art, music, radio. I mean, there were pockets of people who went against. They went to listen to American music or other kind of music, but of course, the numbers were very small. Were they significant? Yes, it shows that people were not all very loyal to Hitler, but very rare and very few. Okay, and I think there were many, many movies based on that. I think one of it was The Book Thief. All books were banned, libraries were ransacked, very close monitoring of newspapers, radios were made affordable, but only pro programs, loudspeakers listening to foreign stations were banned. I think there's so many movies on that. I think you can watch it. Now, Rise of the Secret Police, because they wanted to make sure that they control everyone. All right, they use a variety of methods: propaganda, censorship. If failed, use violence. Okay, and of course you have your SS, the personal bodyguards, and their aim was really to destroy anyone who was against Nazi and carry out racial policies. Right, you have people who spearheaded what they call the death hate units. They were the ones that were in charge of concentration camps. And then you have the Waffen SS, the special purpose troops, and they were the ones that was involved in fighting during World War II. And you have the Gestapo. This was the scariest, in fact, because this was the spies. And and because of this, the fear and the safety of people, and why the Germans, even if they were not happy or they felt that it was unfair or they wanted to speak up, this was also something that they fear. The climate of fear was very real. Because of Hitler's hatred towards the Jews, of course, they always portray them as evil. And we must remember that one of the many things that the Nazi Party aimed was to establish a greater Germany. Okay, so what were the things that he did to remove the minorities? We call minorities were group minorities, like the Jews or people who were non-Germans, right? Boycotting, they were segregated, jobs were taken, they were destroyed financially, their institutions, their houses, their businesses were removed. All right, all these pictures I think you have seen before. And of course, if that does not stop, they went ahead to look at the Nuremberg laws, where Hitler deprives the Jews of citizenship. There was not it was prohibited for them to get married. They were humiliated, abused, and many wealthy Jews escaped because they knew that if they stayed in Germany, they would suffer. It got worse when, because of an incident in Paris, in fact, Hitler used this as an excuse to unleash a campaign, the Night of the Broken Glass. So there was looting, there was destruction of the Jewish shops, there was a lot of arrestment, and I think you can find this on the internet, on YouTube. There are many examples of this, all right, something like this. And of course, the final solution was proposed, where once persecution of Jews outside Germany, right, and by World War II, one-third of Jews in Europe were actually killed. And of course, we all know the unfortunate incident of the Holocaust, right? There was about 6 death camps in Poland, if I'm not mistaken, and of course, all those experiments and things that was done to this particular race. Of course, there was gypsies, there were people who of a different sexual orientation, the disabled, the handicapped. So he believed that they were a threat, and some of them were subjected to also segregation, right? And they were sent to concentration camps or they were gassed to death, because the whole idea is I want a perfect German society. Right now, how about the role of women? So we talk about it. The women, they were given the right to vote. They had a bit of equality, but they were confined to the role of the mother and spouse. Okay, and women only joined Nazi Party if they were useful, such as nurses or cooks. But at the same time, while they see this as oppressive, they had great admiration towards Hitler. The role of women only came out later, especially nearer the war when the Nazi Party needed more manpower, or specifically woman power, to make military weapons. Now, the role of Hitler Youth, they were very essential. Um, the Hitler Youth had a lot of members. The girls joined, of course, and they formed the League of German Girls, measures to ensure loyalty of German youth to the Nazis. So if you see this now, all right, which is the notes, which you can find still in that particular folder, all right, we are looking at this part, consolidation of the Nazi rule. Okay, it's about how he established the one-party rule, which I explained, his political impact, economies, and the impact of economic policies and the impact of social policies. All right. So what I've done here is I've done it in terms of year, the event, a bit of description, elaboration, and the impact. How did this lead to Hitler's rise in power? Okay. Same thing. Okay. These are all the explanation. So have to read it, and I put there at the end just some pointers whether or not you think that it did benefit the people. Okay, what was Hitler's economic aim? Same thing: re-employment, control of trade union, rearmament, and militarization. But what I've put there is the positive and negative impact for every of this economic factor. Okay, and social policies as well. All right, whether or not it was positive and negative. Okay, you can read it. So it's simplified. And then, of course, at the end is some resources that you can look at. And these are possible, again, possible end of the year essay, possible essay questions for O level as well as N level. Okay, so O level is here. I have printed, I will print this and give this to you. So this is the essay itself, which we'll go through in class, all right? When we unpack these essays, okay? And then you have, of course, the N-level essays, all right? And then these are some of the ways that we can answer. All right, so take a look at it, recap on it, okay? And then when we unpack, it will help. So all these materials can be found in the Google folder and Google sharing. All right, so start your revision. Okay, bye-bye.